Good morning everyone! On this blessed morning I decided to make a spinning top. A nice piece of maple was lying around and I felt the itch to spin it, so I threw it onto the lathe. As a first step with all things lathe, I turned a square object into a round object. Once it was nice and round, I threw it onto a chuck and started creating the general shape of the spinning top. First, I shaped the bottom and then the handle and finished it by giving the functional form to the body. I wanted to make this one as generic of a shape as possible with a relatively round, non-pointy bottom. I quickly gave the bottom of the top a quick sanding to ensure I had cut everything in how it would be shaped and finished the rest of the handle into a slim, elegant form. Now that the shape of the top was completely ready, it was time to sand it. Starting from 60 grit and slowly going all the way to 7000 grit. This video is sped up, but I sanded continuously for 30 minutes to achieve a smooth finish of 7000 grit. When I reached 7000 grit, it was all smooth and shiny. I mainly focused on the bottom to ensure that there would be as little friction as possible when spinning. Now it was ready to be cut off of the main piece. While cutting the piece off, one odd thing I noticed while sanding was that the color of the wood changed from pale yellow to orangish. I don't know how that happened, so tell me if you know. With the top cut off, it was time to make the base next. The top of it I made slightly curved inward to keep the top from jumping out, and for the sides I had no particular shape in mind and let the chisel do the talking. Once the shape was ready, just like with the top, I gave everything a good sanding, starting from 60 grit and going up to 7000 grit. I was a bit scared because my fingers were very close to the chuck, but I managed to keep them out of harm's way. And again, I noticed that the color of the wood became slightly more orange while I was cutting the base off. But I didn't focus on it too much since I was more concerned about not smacking my chisel against the chuck. While trying to cut, I made a slightly inward cut so that the other side of the base would also be inward. All that was left was to finish the cut-off parts to match the rest of the piece they were attached to. I started with the base and wrapped it in cloth to prevent chuck marks on it from chuck pressing too hard. Then I gently pressed my chisel against the wood to give the inward curved shape. When working with a piece secured on a chuck like that, it is essential to be cautious about applying too much pressure. The loose grip can damage the part and cause it to fly off the chuck. It's also necessary to ensure the chuck is not over tightened to prevent teeth from leaving marks on the wood. After obtaining the rough shape, I began sanding aggressively with 60 grit to shape the piece further. Then I gradually worked my way up to 7000 grit, and again the color turned orangish. With the base completed, all that was left was the top handle itself. For the handle, however, I didn't sand to a higher grit and stopped at 800 grit because if I went higher, it would be much harder to create enough friction between the hand and the top to give the top a proper spin. And with that, the spinning top was ready. I honestly didn't expect the results I got out of it. This top can spin anywhere between 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the spin you give it. That was mind-boggling, and it is now my favorite top made to date. Of course, I will make more tops, so stay tuned for that. When I started this channel, I aimed to achieve a top that could spin for 5 minutes, and one day, I intend to get there. If you watched this far, I appreciate all of you watching these videos. They take a lot of time and I spend roughly 16 hours per video. Sorry I took a break, but it needed to happen so I could enjoy my summer correctly with the kids. However, now that the weather is getting colder, expect me to start releasing videos of everything I made over the summer. However, the frequency of releases might be one video every 2 to 3 weeks. If you enjoyed what you saw and want to see more, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. And you can even say hi. I promise I will respond as fast as possible. See you in my next video where I will make a cutting board. Bye bye!